The headstone at his grave is almost completely taken by the roots of an American elm tree, and soon it may be unrecognizable. He lies with thousands of military men, so many that it becomes overwhelming trying to process all the faces and the stories that lie beneath each white headstone. This soldier was once one of those many faceless men lying in Cave Hill Cemetery in Louisville, Kentucky, but as fate would have it, his headstone would stand out and be noticed. The uniqueness of his grave grabbed my attention and curiosity and caused me to research him. This video is his story and what I learned about him. Hey everybody, this is Colonel Carson with Family Tree Nuts, and recently I was visiting Cave Hill Cemetery, and like I often do, I stopped into the military section to pay my respects to my brothers and sisters there. This soldier's grave caught my eye, and I just had to know his story. And by the way, if you like videos like this, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell so you get notifications when we post new videos. We have videos all over the United States and a few countries. Our honored veteran is First Lieutenant Henry Clay Simpson. I personally did his research and found a great deal about him and his family. I'm looking forward to sharing what I found with you. And as I do, I'll show you some of the documents that I found to get that information. Like anyone that we research in genealogy, we have to set our limits of how much time we will dig into their story. What I have found is quite extensive, but I want to go on record and say that there are many mysteries about him still left to be solved. Now let's honor Lieutenant Simpson and tell you his story. Henry was born on January 29, 1830 in New Hampshire. He was no doubt named after the very popular senator of the time, the great compromiser Henry Clay. Knowing that he was born in New England and then he was named after a famous American that was anti-slavery gives us tremendous clues about his upbringing. Henry married Mary Elizabeth Carson on November the 8th, 1850 in Burlington, Vermont. Mary was born in 1829 in Maine, and if she's related to me, it would have to be all the way back into Northern Ireland or even Scotland. At some point, likely early in 1851, the family moved to LaGrange, Wyoming County, New York, where Mary gave birth to twins on December the 12th, 1851. As you will learn later in this video, these twins were at least the third generation in a row with multiple baby births. One of the twins died, and the other one was named Helen Minerva Clay, who will be referred to later. She was no doubt named after Henry's younger sister, Helen. Sometime between 1852 and 1858, the couple had another child that died. Likely in 1856, Henry and the family moved to Minnesota. Henry's son, Ernest Henry Simpson, was born in Wautopa, Wabasha County, Minnesota on June 29, 1859. In 1860, the family lived in Wabasha County, Minnesota. Henry was listed as an editor, presumably at a newspaper. His home was worth $100 and his personal belongings valued at $1,000. This shows that they were living modestly. His daughter Helen's death certificate in 1939 lists his occupation as a printer. At age 31, Henry enlisted at Fort Snelling in St. Paul, Minnesota on June 29, 1861 into Company C, 2nd Infantry Division. His home of record was Lake City, Minnesota, and curiously on his enlistment record, it states that he was born in Germany, which is clearly a mistake. However, we know we have the right person because later in the record it states when and where he died in Lebanon Junction, Kentucky. We did find that the unit had another Henry C. Simpson that served as a private, and he was a butcher when he enlisted. Perhaps this explains the mistake. Also, as a side note, I did some digging on the newspaper called the Lake City Leader, which published its first issue on September the 28th, 1861 in Henry's hometown. This was just after Henry enlisted and just before he headed off to war. Since Henry was listed as an editor and a printer, could he have established the newspaper in Lake City when he arrived and maybe sold his equipment to those that founded the Lake City Leader? Did his newspaper go under and that is the reason why he enlisted? These stories make sense, but perhaps we may never know without doing some more in-depth digging. Henry left with his unit and headed to Louisville, Kentucky on October the 14th, 1861 and arrived there October 22nd. The next day, they were sent to Lebanon Junction and his unit was there until December the 8th, a few days after his death. Lebanon Junction was a town that sprang up in 1858 and was an important switching point for the Louisville and Nashville Railroad. Henry's unit's occupation of the area was to protect this junction. Upon Henry's October departure to Kentucky, his wife Mary moved the children back to Rumney, Grafton County, New Hampshire, to stay with Henry's parents. Henry sadly died of typhoid fever on December the 1st, 1861 in Lebanon Junction, Bullitt County, Kentucky. It had only been a month and a half after he had said goodbye to his family before heading out with his unit. On January the 24th, 1862, 5 days before she died, Mary applied for a widow's pension. Her name is signed on it. Mary died on January the 29th, 1862. I searched, but I have not found a cause of death at this time. Her death could be any number of things, but the mind does wander about the potential causes. The family had moved far away from their extended family and lived modestly before Henry enlisted. Then she was left alone with 2 small children. Her grief had to be unimaginable. Henry's father, Daniel Simpson, was appointed guardian of the 2 children on February the 18th, 1862. On July 14th, 1862, Congress approved pensions for minors under the age of 16 who had lost their fathers in the war and had also lost their mothers. On February the 1st, 1864, a pension was filed on behalf of the 2 children by Dr. Daniel L. Simpson, Henry's father, who had recently been made the guardian. The pension application states that the children's mother died on January the 29th, 1862, just 60 days after their father. Henry's children were granted a pension of $17 each per month on July 25th, 1866. The pay was to be backdated to December the 1st, 1861, the date of their father's death, and to end when they turned 16 years old, on December the 11th, 1867 for Helen, and June 28th, 1875 for Ernest. Henry was first buried where he died in Lebanon Junction, but was later moved to Cave Hill National Cemetery in Louisville, Kentucky. I found the relocation document, but it didn't have a date. I did find that a replacement headstone was shipped on February the 13th, 1958 to Cave Hill Cemetery. That headstone is now almost completely covered up by tree roots. Henry's daughter Helen lived with her brother and grandparents in 1870 in New Hampshire. She married Lauren E. Bailey on June 2nd, 1873 in Rumney, New Hampshire. Lauren was a carpenter and a farmer, and the couple had at least 7 children, one of which was named Henry, no doubt after his grandfather and uncle. Helen died on November the 27th, 1939 in Salem, New Hampshire. Henry's son Ernest Simpson lived with his sister and grandparents in 1870 in New Hampshire. He had moved across the country and lived in Williams, Arizona by October 1888. He married Eva Kate Joyce on April the 15th, 1889 in National City, just outside of San Diego, California. Eva's parents were born in New York, and she was born in Indiana in 1869, but lived in Iowa at least between 1870 and 1880, with stops in Illinois in between. In 1883, she lived with her family in New Mexico, and they eventually settled in California. Ernest moved his new wife to Williams, Arizona, where he was a postmaster, and he owned his house outright. Ernest had been raised by his grandfather, who was also a postmaster, and that is likely how he entered the trade. The couple had one daughter named Helena in 1896 in Arizona, who was no doubt named after his sister Helen. Ernest died on December the 27th, 1902 at an asylum near Phoenix, Arizona. He was paralyzed and had a brain affection, which sounds as if he had had a stroke. His house was valued at $1,200 and the furnishings at $500. Lieutenant Henry C. Simpson's parents also have interesting stories. His father was Dr. Daniel Lang Simpson. Dr. Simpson was born on March 9, 1807 in Windham, New Hampshire. He was a physician and graduated medical school in Hanover in 1827. He married Angeline Nealon on February the 5th, 1829, and the couple had 13 children, including a set of triplets whose combined birth weight was over 18 pounds. Imagine carrying them around. Daniel practiced medicine in Colebrook, then Londonderry, Windham, Nashua, and finally in West Rumney, New Hampshire. Daniel was also the postmaster of West Rumney, which could be the reason that his grandson Ernest, that he raised, became the postmaster in Williams, Arizona. Dr. Simpson passed away on July 15, 1879, and is buried in West Rumney, New Hampshire. Lieutenant Henry C. Simpson's mother was Angeline Lucinda Nealon and was born on November the 20th, 1809 in Hamden, Connecticut. Angeline had a twin sister, Adeline, and the two were the oldest living twins in New England. Her sister Adeline died at 88 years old in 1897. They were the first of at least 3 generations in a row that had multiple baby births. Adeline also married a prominent lawyer named John Colby. When the twins were 2 years old, they moved in a covered wagon drawn by 2 horses to Vermont, which took 2 days. Her paternal uncle was Reverend Abner Nealon, who was a radical preacher who advocated for women's rights and racial equality. Later in his life, he rejected the Christian God and was charged for blasphemy by the state of Massachusetts. He was the last man in the United States jailed for blasphemy. Later in life, he founded a utopian society in Iowa, where he died in 1844. Nealon Street in Boston, Massachusetts is named for him. On Angeline's maternal side, her grandfather was Captain Hezekiah Johnson, a Revolutionary War soldier from Connecticut. Lieutenant Henry C. Simpson had 12 siblings, and they spread out all over the map, eventually dying in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Nebraska, and California. From Henry and his dozen siblings, 41 children lived to adulthood. If you used a generation rule of 30 years, and if each child had an average of just 3 children, the descendants of Dr. Daniel and Angeline Simpson would be just under 10,000 people. So there you have it, the story of First Lieutenant Henry C. Simpson and his direct family. All of what you have just heard has been discovered and documented in this video simply because his grave was noticed. What stories like these are left uncovered in your family tree? If doing genealogy is not your thing, or you just don't have time to do the research, be sure to reach out to us. Building family trees is what we do here at Family Tree Nuts, and we'd love to discover your ancestors and their stories. Be sure to let us know what you think about this story in the comments below. We would love to hear your thoughts. We hope that we have brought honor to First Lieutenant Henry C. Simpson by telling his story, and maybe someday when his stone is completely swallowed up, this video will always remain to keep his memory alive. And remember, Family Tree Nuts, let our nuts find the nuts in your family tree.